Hello, my name is Chris Stevens, and I'm co-founding director for the Inspired Leadership Initiative here at Notre Dame. The Inspired Leadership Initiative is a program that we have here which allows people to be able to come to or come back to Notre Dame, and after they finish their traditional careers, to be able to learn, to be inspired, and maybe to inspire others, but also to discover, discern, and decide maybe what they want to do in their next step in life. We're having a program we call Inspiring Conversations, and the title of this one is Leadership in Public Discussions. And what we want to do is to seek out thought leaders in all kinds of disciplines and industries and try to get their perspective about what's going on there. This session is being recorded, so we'll have a chance to be able to put this on the Notre Dame Alumni Association's website, ThinkND. And we want to thank the Alumni Association and the ThinkND staff for their diligent work in helping us do this today. The topic for today is going to be leadership in athletics, and there is no one better equipped to be able to address this issue at Notre Dame than our guest, Missy Conboy. Missy Conboy is the Senior Deputy Athletic Director here at Notre Dame. She's the Chief Liaison to the ACC and the NCAA. As her capacity, she's in charge of industry and campus engagements, policies, law. The bottom line is if it involves student athletes, if it involves athletics, and if it involves athletic facilities, she leads it. So really happy to have Missy here. She's also the Deputy Title IX Coordinator representing the university, and she's been the Senior Women's Administrator for all 37 years that she's been here. Welcome to Inspiring Conversations, Missy.
Thank you, Chris.
Missy, wow. The things that you were responsible for were pretty amazing, but it all journeys back 46 years ago when you first came to Notre Dame, and you had a chance to play on the second team, basketball team, for 4 years, and you were the captain in your senior year. And maybe share with us a little bit the difference between women's athletics and today and back in those days.
Well, let me start out with my journey to Notre Dame because it's very different than what a recruit today might experience. When I was 10 years old, I proclaimed that I was going to go to Notre Dame and I was going to play basketball. They didn't admit women for 2 additional years after that, and they didn't start the basketball program until the year before I got here. So they knew they were preparing for me for several years before I got here. But unlike what a young student athlete experiences today, there was no recruiting on the front end. I showed up on campus. I'm pretty sure there was an organizational meeting at some point. There was a tryout in the fall of that year. We made the team. I'm not even sure we got our shoes. I think I played in red Converse high tops that first year with my blue and gold uniform. But it was just a very different experience. At that time, athletics for women at Notre Dame was under the AIAW, and we were playing at the Division III level. Which was probably the right place for Notre Dame to be, considering that they hadn't had women, until 1972. But very quickly, things started to change. When I first got here, we played a very local or regional schedule. We played St. Mary's twice, a home and away, which was essentially home twice. And we played very much regional schools, maybe Valparaiso, maybe Taylor, all schools within the region. My sophomore year, we actually got to go to South Dakota. We took a 13-hour bus trip up there, which was a big deal for us because typically we traveled by vans. We stayed in Motel 6s, 4 to a room, and ate fast foods, things you'd never think of doing today, but we all thought it was pretty cool, right? And then my junior year, everything started to change. At that time, Father Joyce and Father Hesburgh decided that they were going to start investing money into women's athletics, and women's basketball was their initial program that they started to focus on. So between my sophomore and junior year, we went from a part-time head coach who also coached tennis and did some administration, and a part-time assistant who was a law student, to a full-time head coach, a full-time assistant coach, a graduate assistant, 12 full scholarships. Now, they didn't go to those of us who were already on the team, but they went to incoming students who could raise the talent level, and they certainly did. So I got an opportunity to experience AIAW Division III program, and then in 1980, the NCAA took over women's sports and their championships as well. So I got to experience being a Division I NCAA athlete with roughly the same talent level for me. So there were some very interesting stories into my junior and senior years. My junior year, we just had 2 scholarship student athletes join us, and one of them was injured shortly after she came. So we really were a Division III program playing with one Division I scholarship athlete. And we still hold the record for the most lopsided loss in Notre Dame history at home in front of all 27 fans that were there. We lost to South Carolina, a team ranked number 2 in the country at the time, by the score of 127-48. Claire, you might have to check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that record still stands. Not one I'm particularly proud of. But the next year, we actually traveled to South Carolina with the men's team, the first time in the history that the men and women had traveled together, played at South Carolina and lost by 20. So we took that as a moral victory. By that time, we had 5 more scholarship student athletes on the team, and we were playing at a different level. But again, even with the infusion of some scholarship money and with better coaching, we still were primarily a regional school. It was 10 more years before women's basketball was invited to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 1992. So when you look at the program today and you look at the early commitment of our student athletes when they're 16 years old, the incredible recruiting that we have to engage in to secure those student athletes, the experience that they have when they get here, the support mechanisms with academic services and nutrition and athletic training and strength and conditioning and leadership programs. It's just a vast departure from what I experienced. But the fun thing for me is I've been here for 37 years, and I've got to play a role in all of those support enhancements that we've been able to provide for our student athletes today. And I've been able to really have an equity eye on it as well and make sure that as we support our team today, we are always focused on whether we're providing an equitable experience for our male and female student athletes.
Wow.
So long-winded, but...
No, that's okay. Now, that kind of mirrors my journey a little bit, if I may. We had all kinds of injuries and issues my sophomore year when I started. We went 6-20 and lost to Indiana on national TV 94-29. So, and then my senior year, we knocked off the UCLA's 88-game streak. So
we both hold that record.
Yes,
maybe.
we do. I
Yeah.
think so. Inspiring conversation it is.
Yeah.
But
How far we've come.
you had a chance after you graduated from here to choose what you wanted to do, and you ended up at the University of Kansas Law School. Earned your law degree, and then you ended up at the NCAA in enforcement. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So when I was at Notre Dame and contemplating my next steps, as many of you are contemplating your next steps following transitioning from one career to the next, I didn't really consider athletics administration as an option. Back then, there were very few athletics administrators, and they felt very separate from the programs. I met Moose Krause a couple of times. I saw him at a couple of our games. Gene Corrigan came in my senior year. I had met him a couple of times, but there weren't a lot of role models for women in the athletics department, and there wasn't a lot of interaction that would kind of plant a seed with me to say, this is what you should be looking at doing after you graduate. So my father was a JAG officer in the Army, and so law had always been something that was percolating in the background, so I ended up going to the University of Kansas Law School. Both my older sisters had gone to KU because we had been stationed at Fort Leavenworth, and that was an easy transition for them. We moved to Heidelberg, Germany my senior year in high school, so again, with me wanting to go to Notre Dame and coming from, I think they thought I was German, and I was an all-Europe player, even though there were only like 7 teams in Europe. So it looked pretty good on my resume. I'm sure they thought I was better than I was. But I had a much broader perspective of where I wanted to go to school and maybe what I wanted to do. And so I went to the University of Kansas for law school. I did clerkships with different firms, internships after my first and second year in Texas and in Kansas City, and I really liked Kansas City, and I thought I'd like to stay there, but I wasn't sold on being in a law firm. And so I happened to be, all comes back to basketball. I was at a pickup hoops basketball game at lunch at the rec center, and the dean of the law school was there playing. And he said, hey, have you ever thought about working at the NCAA? And at that time, it wasn't in Indianapolis, it was in Shawnee Mission, Kansas, which was right down the road from KU. And some of his former students had leadership positions at the NCAA. So he connected me, and I was fortunate that they were looking, the timing was right. They were looking for former athletes, females. They only had one other female on their enforcement staff, and lawyers. And so at that time, it was probably a little bit of a rarity. Today, you'd get like 800 applications for that, but the timing was right, and with the endorsement of the dean of the law school, I happened to get a job with the enforcement staff. So I was one of 10 investigators there, and I would spend my time going out and looking into recruiting infractions, mostly in basketball, football, men's basketball, football, some track, number of different cases. And essentially, I was the prosecutor for the NCAA for the cases I was handling. I would go before the Committee on Infractions. The school would be at the opposite side of the room. We'd present our case, and then the Committee on Infractions would make a determination as to whether there would be probation or loss of scholarships or other things like that, other penalties. And so it was a natural with my background. And I really I liked Kansas City. I thought I'd stay there. I didn't really see a door opening to go elsewhere. But I started to see my colleagues in the enforcement staff getting picked off by different schools because SMU got the death penalty while I was there. People started to worry about what are we doing to minimize our risks? Do we need to start a compliance staff at our school? So I saw my colleagues getting picked off, and I also had just become reacquainted with Gene Corrigan, who was the athletic director at the time, and he was looking to bring somebody to handle compliance to the university. And I think he was looking for a Notre Dame grad. He was looking for add a female to their senior staff because they didn't have any. And he was looking for somebody with compliance experience. So again, I was like the only person in the country that had those three things. So I fell into two great positions, and I decided I might not get lucky a third time. So I just spend the next 37 years here.
So when you got here, and you've been the senior women administrator for all 37 years, and in addition to the things I outlined before, you're also the sport administrator for the volleyball team, which requires you to travel. But you've overseen so much here, Missy. I mean, the Compton Ice Arena, the building of that, the Crossroads project, the Harris Track Museum, Stadium, the indoor football arena, and then you have all these other responsibilities. How do you juggle all of those things?
When people ask me about being a parent, how do you manage being a working mom? And I'm like, very poorly. No, but I think the most exciting thing about working in athletics is that every day is different. So while you might have a lot of responsibilities, not all of them are requiring your attention each and every day. And you have a wonderful staff that can focus on things when you might not be able to. But I really think that's what attracted me to the department and what allowed me to stay within the department throughout all these years is the business is changing so much. And we've had to kind of modify how we do our work within the athletics in order to adapt to the changing business. And so, I've had opportunities through changes in athletics administration and through the changing nature of the work to do things that I never thought I would have had the opportunity to do. I never knew I was a frustrated interior designer until I got a chance to oversee facilities and capital projects. And then it's like, wow, I can no longer afford my own projects at home because I'm used to having Notre Dame's budget. But what I would say is that it is a lifestyle job, and your family has to sign on to it. And if you're going to stay in this business for a long time, your kids have to at least like sports. And two out of my three kids did. The other one we had to drag to a number of places. But you're waking up Christmas morning at a bowl game every year, and so you have to figure out how you're going to still give your children a wonderful holiday, experience. When you ask the bowl director, where do I get a tree to put in the room? And when you're putting packages in your colleague's suitcase so they can put it in a different room and you can go get it at midnight. There are things, your family has to sign on to this and think it's a cool experience. And luckily, my husband really did, and my children did as well. All three of my daughters, enjoyed, that Christmas was at bowl games, that they got to go to national championship games, that they got to meet student athletes who are incredible role models to them, and they got to aspire to do some of the things that those student athletes were doing. So, there's some wonderful, it's a lifestyle job. It takes a lot of weekends and evenings, and every additional thing you say yes to means more preparation. But if your family's enjoying the experience, and if you're enjoying the experience, and you're getting to do something different every single day, it's pretty fun.
So this is kind of a spot putter, but if you can think of all the things that you are responsible for, is there one in particular that you enjoy the most that you can think of?
So, early on in my career, I got an opportunity, in addition to being in charge of compliance, I got an opportunity to oversee 13 different sports at the same time, which was crazy, but we were competing at a different level then. Now, the level we're competing at, it's much more difficult to oversee multiple sports, and for the most part, we have one sport per administrator. But just that opportunity to interface with the student athletes. I get to do it now with volleyball. I'm involved in their recruitment. I'm meeting their parents. I'm telling them about all the life-changing elements of Notre Dame and why this is different than any other place in the country that they can go to. I mean, the coaches do that too, but coaching staffs come and go, and sometimes they're not as familiar with kind of the lifelong benefit of being at Notre Dame. So the administrator can play that role. And I'm writing letters of recommendation for them to go to graduate school, or I'm a reference for their job, or I'm just talking them through a really difficult time that they're experiencing. And so that was a tremendously enjoyable part of the job when I first started out. But then as you move up the ladder, you get less of that interaction with the student athletes because maybe you're older. Maybe they're less interested. I was a big sister to them when I first got here, and then I was like a mom, and now I could be their grandmother, and it's not, So they're looking at you differently, and they're also looking to get advice on some things from perhaps some more junior folks on your team. So what I love right now is that I still, through volleyball and my association with that sport, kind of acting as a general manager, I get an opportunity to still have that one-on-one contact. And even though I've been in that position, both with young men and young women, it's having had 3 daughters, being one of 4 daughters, it's particularly impactful for me when I can be a resource to them because they're juggling some of the same big questions about what kind of career do I have? Do I want to have a family? Can I do it all at the same time? And you can be a resource to them saying, yeah, it's possible. It's not easy, but it is possible, and here are the ways that you can go about thinking about it.
Yeah, speaking of difficulties for student athletes, these are hard times. With name, image, and likeness allowing student athletes to be able to monetize their brand, the advent of the transfer portal so that now student athletes can transfer without even having to sit a year. Over 20,000 Division I athletes were in the portal last year. It's an incredible number. And social media, et cetera. I mean, do you think these changes are good for college sports, or do you think they're good for Notre Dame or not?
Oh, wow. Yeah. And the rest of the time will be spent on this answer. No. Let's separate the two in particular. So the portal. Do I think the portal is good? Well, if you're a parent of a homesick student athlete who wants to transfer to the state university in your backyard, you might say, yeah, it's good for the student athlete. Or if a student athlete isn't playing and never sees themselves playing in the lineup, and this is very important to them, and they want to go to a place that they feel like they can contribute more. Or, perhaps their major, they've decided to change majors, and Notre Dame doesn't have the major that they're looking for, sure. And so they want to become an athletic trainer, and we don't have an undergraduate course of study in that. So there are legitimate reasons why student athletes might want to transfer, and there are other reasons. I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend, whatever it might be, or they don't like their roommate, whatever it might be. Before you could transfer without any year in residency, you were forced to kind of work through problems that you have. I mean, I think if you look at the workforce in general nowadays, young people there's a tendency to if this doesn't feel right at this job, 3 months later I want to move to this job, 7 months later I want to move to this job. It is a way to move up the ladder. Certainly there are opportunities to do that, but if you're moving because you have an issue with where you are, I would really like to see student athletes stay, talk to their coaches, see if they can work through that issue, and I think it's a great life skill that they can take with them to their next stop. So now that we've taken the year in residency off, you can transfer once right now during your time at an institution without that 1-year residency requirement. You have to re-recruit those kids every single day. Even if they're not playing, even if they're not getting to the lineup, even if they're injured, you need to make sure that you are keeping in front of them the reasons why they chose Notre Dame, that they chose it for the school, they didn't choose it for a coach, they didn't choose it for, a dorm, they chose it because they wanted to be here. And even though some other things aren't going well, this is still the place that they should stay and get their degree. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. But I do think that it's changed the way our coaches have had to interact with our student athletes. And I'm just not, from a Is it good for Notre Dame? It's really difficult for us to get recruits coming in that are transfers, okay? If you didn't get into Notre Dame and you always wanted to go there, and you decide to go to Boston College and transfer back to Notre Dame, or you decide to go to Vanderbilt and you're going to transfer back to Notre Dame, what you do is you call the admissions office and say, what courses do I need to take my freshman year when I'm at this other school so that I am ready and that you will accept me if I want to transfer back? I mean, they may decide not to. They may have a great experience, but if they decide to transfer back, they have all those prerequisite courses that they need to come back to the university. If you're a student athlete, you're not thinking you're going to transfer back to Notre Dame. You're thinking it's going to work out great at Boston College. So when it comes to the point where you think, there's an opportunity for me to transfer back, and you look back at what they've taken their freshman year, have they taken online courses, particularly in asynchronous online courses? Notre Dame won't accept those. If they're not going to be on track with satisfactory progress requirements of the NCAA to play the next year, why would we recruit them to come back? So since the portal has really activated, we have a tough time getting undergraduate student transfers to Notre Dame. It happens every once in a while. It doesn't happen very often. For the most part, and it's been a little bit easier during COVID, we've recruited the transfer who's a grad transfer, who's really excited about one of our Mendoza programs. Or we've recruited more incoming freshmen. But if you look at some of our lineups, there's a gap in the middle because people have transferred out and they haven't transferred in at the same level. So that's a challenge for Notre Dame.
Yeah. You take those challenges along with social media and the pressures of that, but also, there's wars going on in Ukraine and the Middle East. There seems to be the constant threat of nuclear war from Russia and China and North Korea. What are maybe some of the support systems that are in place for student athletes? Because some of these pressures have got to be affecting some kids.
Well, I love that question. I totally just your portion of the question on NIL. So because that's tied into this as well. So let me circle back really quickly.
Okay.
So NIL, is that good for Notre Dame? Well, Father John and Jack Swarbrick have been proponents of NIL for a long time. And so when it finally came into to reality, we were excited about what it could offer to our student athletes. But the way it's played out is that there is very little legitimate NIL that's based on the true value of a student athlete. And there's a lot of what looks like pay for play going on in college athletics. And in the portal, you suddenly find that you used to worry about just the student athletes who might not be having a great experience because they weren't playing. Now you're worried about the student athletes that are playing a lot because other schools are tampering, and they're saying that there's more opportunities for NIL or pay for play at other locations. So putting the portal and NIL together, it's just a recipe for you can't ever feel really comfortable because you're going to have to re-recruit the non-players and re-recruit the players and hope that somebody isn't out there doing something illegal to try to lure them away. Again, we double down on our difference that we're Notre Dame. We're offering you things that nobody else in the country can. But sometimes 18 to 22-year-olds aren't making the best decisions there. Now, segueing over to your question about all of these pressures, I think students in general are having a tough time with everything that's going on, both in in intercollegiate athletics and in social media in the world, and the way some of these pressures going on internationally are affecting athletics may not seem like a lot, but if we have an international student athlete who is worried about what's going on in their home country or in their region of the world, if we're trying to take trips with our current student athletes and give them an international experience, sometimes we're not able to go to locations that we'd like to take them to because of safety concerns. Very fortunate for us, we have a great international studies office that helps us navigate that and figures out how to get help to our student athletes who need it and directs us away from areas of conflict where we don't want to engage with our international travels. But those, I think in general, there's a 24-hour news cycle right now, and there's even I'm guilty of right before I go to bed. It's the news in the country right now, and it's depressing, right? And so, if you are an 18 to 22-year-old and you're thinking about how all of these world events are going to impact your life, your family, your career, all the choices that you want to make, it's a lot, and it's a lot for a regular student at Notre Dame, and it's exacerbated if you add all of the challenges that you encounter as a student athlete. If somebody's on your social media account telling you that you suck and that that you shouldn't be in the starting lineup, or if somebody, if people are saying mean things, or people are mad because they bet on your game and you didn't deliver what they had bet on. So all of these additional pressures that impact our student athletes, just kind of raises the bar for what kind of services we need to provide. So what do? So if you saw recently, Notre Dame received a very generous gift from the Veldman family to really kind of increase our mental health services for the campus in general. We utilize central counselors from campus, but we house many of them within athletics because we want to make sure that our student athletes have easy access to them, and that it's not a stigma to be walking into the health center. It's actually very acceptable to walk into the sports counselor's office. You might not talk about your free throw and why you're only shooting 40%. You might be talking about a challenge you have with your family or your girlfriend or your academic studies, but it's still the accessibility of that's important. And then we have so many other services that in the athletic performance area where we're helping them think about how much sleep they get every night. And we have the ability to monitor their sleep and see whether they could be doing different things that could help their mental health. We have nutritionists that are working on what they're eating, and we have academic counselors who are helping them on the road with mandatory study halls, or don't worry about that test that professor knows you have an excused absence and that you're going to have a day when you get back from the national championship game before you have to take your finals. So all of these support mechanisms are really intended to kind of bring down that stress level and allow them an opportunity to operate at least more like the regular student body who has many of the same challenges, but maybe not all of the same pressures.
Yeah. 2 more questions before we open up to our live audience for questions. So Jack Swarbrick, the amazing Jack Swarbrick, is stepping down, and he's been replaced by Pete Pravacqua. And I'm just kind of curious, have you had a chance to be able to interact with Pete yet, and how would you characterize his leadership style?
Well, we have had a lot of opportunities to interact with Pete because Notre Dame always does things a little bit differently, and certainly bringing in an athletic director in waiting and giving him the opportunity to kind of shadow Jack for an entire year and kind of understand the intricacies of what's happening in intercollegiate athletics right now. And also bringing this incredible outside perspective from his time as the head of PGA Clubs of America and his time as chair of NBC Sports. How many other schools can attract the chair of NBC Sports to come and be an athletic director and waiting for a year before he moves into the leadership role? So the great thing is we've gotten to know Pete as a person. We've gotten to know how he thinks about things through meetings. It's always interesting in meetings because you're still talking to the athletic director, but you also want to make sure Pete's getting the information he needs to be able to move into that role at the end of the year. So we now have a transition program in place where he will be, he's already overseeing all the fall sports and all the budget preparations for next year, but as of March 25th, he'll be transitioning into the AD role, and Jack will transition to AD Emeritus for a few months till June 30th to, again, finish out that transition year. And so I don't know that we'll get a true glimpse of what type of leadership style he has until because he's incredibly respectful of Jack's role and wants to learn from him right now, but understands how Father John wants him to operate during this year. So I think all will be revealed on March 25th when we get a chance to have him in that lead role in meetings. But I just a flashback. I've had this unbelievable opportunity to work with some of the most incredible leaders. Most people have to wait till much later in their career to directly report to somebody of the stature of a Dick Rosenthal or Mike Wadsworth, Kevin White, Jack Swarbrick, and now Pete Pravacqua. It's been incredible to how Notre Dame has really looked to engage individuals from other industries who have great leadership pedigree to come, who have a nexus to college sports. All of them had a nexus. So Dick Rosenthal was an All-American basketball player and participated in NBA for a couple seasons before he took over a leadership helm at St. Joe Bank. And he had a great financial mind, and he was the one who cut the first NBC contract. That's still today a something that sets us apart from everyone else. And then you had Mike Wadsworth, Canadian ambassador to Ireland, who had also played football here and been in the CFL and done broadcasting and was a lawyer. I mean, incredible communication skills, just a remarkable person to be around. Very big picture, delegated a lot, different kind of leader. Kevin White came from college athletics. He was Gene Corrigan pedigree. He came in here with a plan. We're going to fully scholarship our programs. We're going to hire great coaches and put them under contract, and we're going to build great facilities through a master planning process. So that formula had worked for him at other places. He brought that here. And then Jack came in with a totally different background, a lawyer who was a big thinker, a strategic thinker, creative thinker, who figured out a way, even though he was in a law firm, to bring the NCAA to Indianapolis and the Pan American Games and the Super Bowl and get involved with the things he was passionate about, and then took advantage of the opportunity here and to set that big thinking into motion here. So the jury's still out on Pete, because we don't know what he wants to bring here, but he's very creative, and I've heard a couple of his ideas already, and I'm super excited to be breaking in my 5th athletic director, or my 6th.
Well, last question from me. Somebody once said there's 3 kinds of people in this world: people who make things happen, people who watch things happen, people who wonder what happened. And you certainly have made things happen in your roles here at Notre Dame over the past 37 years. Are there any particular accomplishments that you're particularly proud of?
So, gosh, 37 years. I would say 2 in particular, and they both go back to my time overseeing facilities and capital projects. And I think the first was the opportunity to be involved in the Campus Crossroads project and be the athletic department lead, because we were taking an iconic stadium that was, had so much tradition, and we had to figure out a way to innovate, make it attractive to fans today, give them some of the amenities that they want, including premium hospitality and a major video board and all those things. But we had to do it in a way that when they walked into that stadium, that they still felt that they were at Notre Dame. So Jack came up with the big idea of the Campus Crossroads project, but one of the great things about Jack is he's on to the next idea. And so, we were doing a reorganization at the time. He said, I want you to take the lead in this project. So, I mean, what an amazing opportunity we worked with an outside firm that had a number of Disney alum in that group to kind of imagine what we want to do in the concourses, what do we want to do in the premium areas, what do we want to do in the North End, because we want that to still have the aura and the tradition that Rockne had, but how do we take what was a really unfortunate team locker room and turn it into something that still felt Notre Dame, but had some really cool elements to it as well. So getting a chance to be the point person on that, certainly working with the architect's office and some outside consultants and outside architecture firms and the campus community, but really getting to say, no, we can't do that. Or, it was my idea to take all of the bleachers out of the stadium and put them on the walls all over the place. And everybody's like, what? When I first said it, but it was a really fun thing to do, because I'd been, going through my Pinterest or my House app and thought this would be cool. And to be able to do something that I hear people going through Duncan Student Center and say, isn't that cool that they put the bleachers on the wall? So that's number 1. Number 2 would be the opportunity I had to plan the transition from a rec sports building to a basketball practice facility, Rolf's Athletic Hall. And so, there wasn't a lot of equity when I was here as a student athlete. And every year I feel like the situation got better for our female student athletes. But here was an opportunity to oversee a project that was going to be the, everyday practice facility for the team that followed my team by 40 years. And it was just incredible to go through and say, I can make everything absolutely equitable. And if somebody asked me, I'd probably spend a little bit more money on the women's side. Not out of spite, but because they had a lot of national championships I had to recognize. And it was expensive to put all those floors on the wall and with the logo. But it's just so fun when we bring a recruit into that space, male or female, for them to know that that equity is important to us, and that we have created a facility here that really shows that we want to achieve at the highest level, regardless of whether you're playing for our men's or our women's team. So those would be the 2.
I love that. Missy, you've been incredibly generous with your time. I would just say, any maybe final thoughts that you'd like to be able to offer to the fellows and their guests?
First of all, I think this is a remarkable program, and I'm thinking like, how long till I retire? And can I do this for a year? Maybe they'll send me through this program because I've been here so long. But just wonderful. I think at this point in all of our lives, we're figuring out how do we take the next step? How do we do something meaningful? And maybe I always say I might become an interior designer. Maybe I'll write a book. Maybe all the different opportunities that are open to you, and to have a full year to come and to see what's out there. I feel like when we went through school, it's like you were going to become an accountant, a lawyer, or a doctor, and now to see the varied career paths that are open to students today, and getting a chance to think about whether any of those might make sense for the next chapter for all of you, I think is super exciting, and I congratulate you on kind of that, taking the time to discern those next steps, and I wish all of you great luck as you move forward.
Leadership in Athletics, Missy Conboy. That kind of wraps up this session of Inspiring Conversations, with conversations on leadership in athletics. And I want to thank again the Alumni Association and Think ND for their support of this effort. And if you're interested in learning more about the Inspired Leadership Initiative or applying, you can just go to ili.nd.edu. We'd love to have you. Thank you again, Missy.